4.
Freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. Brand new intro music for this week because this is Masters Week and this is your DFS Preview. Joining me to break it all down is Greg DuCharme. Greg, how about that intro, dude?
You can't beat it. It is perfect. So Jacob, great job on that. We got to keep that thing rolling because it is just fantastic.
It's so good. Drop the questions in the chat. We'll get through as many as we can. We are going live again. Also, obviously a big week for us. We've got Mark on site. We've got Kyle on site. So if you want to ask any questions about anything, now's the time. Drop a 5-star rating and review in Apple iTunes. Leave your question in that review and we'll do our best to get through it. Also, golf props. They're back, Greg. More money than ever, $5 grand if you win the golf props this week. We'll talk about that, but a big, big prize, my friend.
Yes, sign me up. I mean, these things are the best. They're look, how could you pass up that opportunity? I don't understand it. So you got to get involved.
Answer 10 questions, win $5 grand. It's very, very simple. And I will tell you, one of them has gotten easier because Sergio Garcia is no longer playing. So one of them's a lot easier, Greg.
There you go. Yeah, special hint. I think even I could get that one right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, here we go. So let's jump into this week. Now, the Masters. Of course, we know everything there is to know about the tradition, but the one tradition that we are not going to see this year, Greg, is the 10-shot rule. So normally the cut line would be the top 50 players and ties, plus anyone within 10 shots of the lead. Sometimes this comes into play. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you get a lot more golfers who make the weekend if it's a really compact leaderboard, but no more in 2020. The 10-shot rule is gone. So those 6 of 6 lineups going to be even more difficult to get through.
Top 50 and ties, as you mentioned. And we talked about this on Newbury to Golf a little bit this morning. I think a lot of that has to do with the daylight and how much time you're actually going to have to play, which is an important aspect here. So you want to make sure you get the rounds in, especially on Saturday and Sunday. And when I say daylight, it's more than just daylight. It's what we want to end by 3:00 on Sunday, right? And if there's weather, there's a lot of factors involved here. But I think this is ultimately a move to limit the field over the weekend, which could be a good thing, I think, for our viewing purposes. But it could be disappointing for some of the players. Like, for instance, last year there were 9 players that would have been that got in through the 10-shot rule that would not have gotten in if it were this year. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But that being said, Rick, last year 3 over got in, 7 under was leading at the time. Those players at 3 over would have had to reach over the weekend. They would have had to play 16 under to get into a playoff with Tiger and 17. And so what's the likelihood of that happening? It's very slim. So I don't think it's a huge deal, but it definitely affects fantasy golf.
Mark Nickerson is in the chat. Welcome, everyone. Drop those questions. I see them. I'll bring them up at the appropriate time throughout the show. Greg, we're getting more details. We've got boots on the ground. We're starting to see Augusta National in November form. Augusta National released how thick or how long or how short, however you want to put it, the cuts will be for fairways, greens, collars, and then, of course, the old all mowings are subject to weather conditions and growth. Because, Greg, a November Masters is we spent a lot of time talking about how the weather could impact the week. And I'll tell you what, I think they dodged about half of a bullet here. You know, high 70s, low 80s all week long. It's going to be warm. No concerns there. The only real concern, I suppose, is that there are thunderstorms and rain in the forecast essentially every single day.
Yeah, I think early in the week, Thursday is the day that you really got to watch out for weather-wise. As it goes along, you may get a shower here or there, but I think they're going to have some pretty good luck. I don't think it's going to be a washout by any means. When you see thunderstorms like you do for Thursday, that can be a good sign because it can, while it may delay play, it can often mean that they come in and they go out a little bit quicker. whereas rain throughout an entire day might not be quite as fun. So I'm actually optimistic about the weather. I do think it will affect the way the golf course plays, but I think you're going to see these guys competing throughout every day. I don't think you're going to see a major weather delay. Maybe that's just me being hopeful, me being optimistic. But you're right, Rick. The biggest news is the temperatures. And we have some, the low 80s, high 70s for the highs, which is great. But the lows are not as low as we expected. Yeah. We expected to see some lows that may even touch the 40s, low 50s at times, which can happen this time of year. That's not going to be the case. Lows are going to be in the 60s, even high 60s at times. So that is, I think, going to make this tournament a little bit more normal as far as the temperature is concerned. A welcome surprise for the players.
Yeah, I think they dodged an unseasonably cold week in November in Georgia. It could have been real frigid. I want to pick up David Walker's question here because I think this is a good time for it. He talks about European players and which ones we like. I assume that, weather, right? I mean, the guy, let's be real. Guys on the PGA Tour, they play in ideal conditions almost every single week. The European Tour guys play in a little bit sloppier, a little bit rainier, sometimes a little bit windier and colder. David asks about, Shane Lowry, about Lee Westwood, but are we doing anything with Europeans as a whole because of the weather conditions? And what do you think about those two guys specifically?
Rain is one thing, right? But when the real challenge that the European players face more often than PGA Tour more often may not even be fair, but the real challenge, the real nasty weather where I'm looking at Europeans to have a slight advantage is when it's wind and rain. Right, a combination. And this week, you're not really, at least what's forecasted, you're not going to see winds that reach double digits. Now, that still presents a challenge at Augusta National. A 5-mile-an-hour wind can be the difference between you hitting a great shot, making a birdie, and hitting it into Rays Creek, or another penalty area on the golf course. It can mean the difference between a birdie and a double bogey in an instant. But that doesn't necessarily favor Europeans, in my opinion. So I'm not sure I'm really favoring Europeans. There are some Europeans I like this week, which we'll get to as we move along here. Yeah. But Shane Lowry was one. Who was the other?
Lee Westwood.
So Lee Westwood's interesting to me because he's been hitting the ball really well, and he hasn't really lost that touch. And he's played well at Augusta before, many times in the past. I still have some questions about his putting. And is he going to get into a major and turn into a better putter? Is this going to be the week where Lee Westwood is a great putter? I don't really have great confidence with that, but I do like Lee Westwood in his price range. I think he's down he's down somewhat low, I would say. 7,200. So he would be an option in that price range without question. Shane Lowry. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, producer Jacob knows that conditions like this could create a good mud ball, and Bubba loves mud balls. Mud ball, yes. Mud ball. That's the best video I've ever seen.
He loves it, man. That is an interesting factor because, Rick, I believe that carry distance is really important in a week like this. If it's soft, if we do get the rain, which, as you can see on this report here, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, rain, and even into Friday as well, although scattered showers Friday, that softens the golf course. It softens the fairways. And it can lead to some mud balls, especially the higher you hit it, the more likely you are to get a mud ball. So I'm very curious to see that balance of the mud ball versus the carry distance. I have a funny feeling carry distance is going to win.
I have a funny feeling it will as well. Also, Greg, the golf props are back, baby. $5,000 by winning our golf props games for this weekend's tournament in Augusta, Georgia. That's me. Quizmaster Rick has already loaded all of the questions in online, and they are ready to rock and roll at cbssports.com/golf props. A link is in the description, and you will need a CBS Sports account to play. You can also find the game on CBS Sports on the CBS Sports app. It's easy peasy lemon squeezy to play. And here is a question you'll find in the game, Greg. Who will make more birdies or better at the Masters? Your options are Justin Thomas, Jon Rahm, or the tie.
Ooh, this is a good one, Quizmaster Rick, because
Thank you.
Last time these two played at the Zozo, it was quite a battle between the two of them at Sherwood. So it'll be interesting to see these two go at it again. I imagine they're both going to have a great week. I'm going to side with Justin Thomas here. I'm not really sure why. It's hard to differentiate between these two because they're both so talented. But I'm going to give a slight edge to Justin Thomas with the iron play. I think that's going to make the difference. I think that's going to lead to more birdies or better.
Okay, I'm also going to take Justin Thomas, but I'm going to save my explanation for the $10,000 range that we are going to jump into right now, led by Bryson DeChambeau at $11,200 on DraftKings. Justin Thomas, the aforementioned, 10,100. John Rahm, 10,500. Rory McIlroy, 10,002, and DJ Dustin Johnson at an even 10,000. Greg, you and I were talking before because the pricing came out so early for the Masters, it came out before the Houston Open. Dustin Johnson goes out, has a great week last week. His odds have moved, but of course the daily fantasy pricing is not going to change. So that built-in value on Dustin Johnson at 10,000, I think it's certainly appealing.
It is absolutely appealing. And that is the factor to look at. Is I would call this disrespectful pricing. But we did see what happened last week. So I understand where it comes from. But for DJ, this is the steal of the tournament right now. This is the best player in the world. He's world number one, and deservedly so. He's finished inside the top 6 since the PGA Championship, every event. And his worst finish was the U.S. Open, which was tied 6th. He went second at the PGA, first at the Northern Trust, second at the BMW, which he lost to a 63-foot putt in a playoff to John Rahm. And then he wins the Tour Championship, and then he comes in tied 6th at the U.S. Open, and then he comes in tied 2nd as well last week. So he's in great form, and there's a determination in Dustin Johnson's eye that I can't look past. He is motivated right now, and there's this kind of idea that Dustin Johnson doesn't really care very much, and he's just out there playing. Well, from what I'm seeing, the way he is as methodical as he is on the greens right now, the intensity that he has in his eyes, I'm not getting the sense that this is it's another tournament. We're going to go and play as best we can. I think this is, I'm going to go win this tournament. And this is, Dustin Johnson to me is due. So I'm definitely putting him in some. He's in my. He's
due. The guy's won like 3 times in like his last 9 starts. He's due for a Masters win.
He's got 1 major.
Okay, gotcha.
He's got 1 major, and I think Brooks reminded him of that too at the PGA, right?
Yeah, all good. Real quick, producer Jacob is dropping graphics in the live chat, which I did not know was coming. So hit the like button. Producer Jacob working hard behind the scenes, much appreciated. We have to talk about Bryson DeChambeau. You and I, again, before we hopped on here, I think this could go one of 2 ways for Bryson. He either wins this by multiple shots, or things go horribly wrong, and I would come out of those, make the cut parlays, White Moses, right? I mean, that's a question from the chat about guys you might want to avoid. I think Bryson is intentionally increasing his range of outcomes. He's going to try to take lines and be aggressive in situations that we've never seen before. And the way he tries to cut 13 and the way he tries to, make corner at 2. If that goes hairy, I think this can go sideways pretty quickly for him, especially with some of the putting woes that he's had at Augusta National. So I'm very optimistic on Bryson. I think if things go right, they go really right. But I also, Greg, think if things go south, they go really south.
I think there's a middle ground here. It'll be, the test will be when something goes wrong, what happens? How does he handle it? Does he try to bite off more than he can chew? Does he try to get it all back in one, or does he take it as is and move on to the next shot? Which I would hope. But look, there's a huge advantage here. There's no question. It's been well documented. Some of the clubs that he's going to hit into these greens, and the rain in the forecast is a big advantage for him. I think his distance plays a greater role when it's soft, because his approach, his wedge play, iron play, which has been, I would say the least attended to area of his game. It's an area that he cares about, but it hasn't gotten the attention of the putting. It hasn't gotten the attention of the club head speed and the driving. So I look to the iron play as well. He gets an advantage when it's a little bit softer. When the ball is bouncing on the greens and need to be that much more precise, he may be at more of a disadvantage. So even at the U.S. Open, the greens in some spots were not as firm as we might have expected. Yeah. So I do think the conditions will be an advantage to Bryson. But as we said, I mean, there's a pathway where he doesn't win. These greens are not easy, and there are so many challenges. You get on the wrong side of some of these hole locations, it can get away from you quickly. So even though you're hitting a short club into many of these greens, danger lurks right around every corner. So I'm not handing this thing to Bryson at this point.
Well, I think what you said is interesting. Like we're only grading Bryson on two outcomes. He wins or he doesn't, right? And that's basically, the own expectations he's put on himself, the expectations we've now put on him. So like 9, which would be a great finish in any major championship. You're probably not happy if you paid the full $11,200 for him. But Greg, there is a guy in the $10,000 that I've now convinced myself is going to win this golf tournament. I think he's probably the best fantasy play, and it's Justin Thomas. He's 10,700. Bryson at the top, DJ at the bottom. And since the restart, Greg, Justin Thomas leads this field in strokes gained approach. He leads this field in strokes gained around the green. That comes in handy. He hits it far. He wins golf tournaments, especially smaller field events that are. I don't want to say this is a no-cut event because every year we get one or two of the big names who find a way to blow up on a hole. But like this, it's time. It's JT time. You talk about guys that are ready for their second major championship. It's Justin Thomas.
Rick, I can't argue with you here. I love the work that he's done. And on course record this morning, he was my pick. So I love Justin Thomas in this spot here. Now he's not quite the value play of Dustin Johnson, but he's a guy that I can't turn away from. The iron play on a second shot golf course like this, and even for Bryson, it's going to turn into a second shot golf course. Justin Thomas has a huge advantage, and he can make birdies. He can make eagles. He can keep up with firepower of a Bryson DeChambeau. He can keep up with the firepower of a Jon Rahm or a Dustin Johnson or a Brooks Koepka. He can keep up no matter how well they're playing. His best is if it's not as good, it's really close to all of those guys. So I think he's ready to win another major. The thing that I'll be watching with Justin Thomas is how he handles the greens. If you see him missing some putts to the right, it may be a concern. If early on he's got the ball started on line and he's making some and he's getting a little bit of momentum, he's going to be in the conversation on Sunday without question.
Let's jump down to the $9,000 race. The way Brooks Koepka, Patrick Cantlay, Colin Morikawa, Terrell Hatton, Webb Simpson, Patrick Reed, Tiger Woods, the defending champion, and Bubba Watson. There is a grab bag here. Anything you want. What is it that you want?
Well, I love the top of this list, which is quite obvious. but when you look at a Xander Schauffele, a Brooks Koepka, a Patrick Cantlay, all three of those guys, there's so much to like. I mean, it's heart eye emoji. You love these guys because Xander, every time he tees it up in a major championship, is right there in the mix, right? He was right there in the mix last year. He's going to be right there in the mix again this year. We know it. It's just, can Xander close the deal and get the job done? I don't have the confidence in Xander winning as much as I do with Brooks Koepka. Although Brooks Koepka to me is more along the lines of what you were saying about Bryson, Rick, where it's, well, he can win. We know if he gets into contention, he's going to be really hard to beat on Sunday.
Yeah.
And if he's within 1, 2, 3 shots of the lead on Sunday, there's a good chance he's the favorite heading into that final round. So I love Koepka for that reason. Patrick Cantlay just coming off of a win. I also love his game is very well suited. He was on the lead. He was on the lead in 2018, and he came and tied 9th last year. He's got a great record here, and he's in great form. So all three of those guys I love. And then you got Bubba Watson down at the bottom, 9K flat, and he's a 2-time champion, and he's also in great form. So,
yeah, he is.
Rick, I look at this, and it's almost like we're in this situation where it's a blind dart throw. Because how do you go wrong? Are there any of these guys you look at and say, I'm a little cautious with this player for this reason?
Yeah. So Kevin from the chat thinks that someone from the 9K range will win. I think that's a pretty good idea. I'm a lot more concerned about Brooks Koepka than I think a lot of people are. He gained over 6 strokes putter, shot and a half around the greens. It was his basically third best short game week ever. I'm worried that he's not able to continue. And I mean, I'm trying to think, and Kyle kind of caught me off guard with this a couple of days ago when he was describing how Brooks Koepka telegraphs his victories, saying that, usually before his wins, he finishes in the top 10 somewhere. And I went back and looked, and he's right. But I also am trying to think, like, when's the last time Brooksy's gone back-to-back with top 10s? Like, in the last calendar year, like, we haven't seen him put 2 good weeks together in a row, you know?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. But, Rick, this is a major championship. I mean, he was in the PGA Championship. He was part of the conversation until
Is that real?
Well, he is immensely talented, and there are signs. Yeah, I think it is. I really do. I think he turns his game to a different level. And it's something we say about athletes in not just golf, but in all sports. Oh, he has that extra gear. It's not just a distance term, right? It's a focus term. It's your play level. Patrick Mahomes does it. When he gets up against a tough competition, all of a sudden he gets down 24 points in a playoff game, and all of a sudden he shifts into another gear. He gets a little bit more focused, and he plays a little bit more better. His performance increases just a little bit more. We see that with Brooks Koepka. And I really do think there's a real switch that he can flip. And I am very confident with the short game and the putting, which is why I believe he has a chance to win this tournament, because the thing I'm least worried about with him is his iron play, even though it was the worst area of his game last week. Iron play was a struggle. I think it's the strong suit of his game as his fingerprint as a player. I think it comes back this week.
I do really like the Bubba stuff, and we've talked about this a lot, right? Bubba's got a Hall of Fame career at 3. Augusta National has disproportionately allowed left-handed players to win it. Mark referred to Bubba as a defensive putter, which usually plays well around Augusta National. He's hitting the ball well from tee to green, so I think we're on the same page there. Let's spend, and I don't know how much time we have to spend on this, but talk about Tiger. He's $9,100. I will be absolutely thrilled on Sunday if he slips on the green jacket for the 6th time, but I will have lost because I will have no investments in it.
I am right there with you. I couldn't agree more. Last year, heading into 2019, there were many signs that success was coming. There was not just the win at the Tour Championship the year before, but there was a great run in the match play. And he really, he lost to, I believe, Christian Bezuidenhout after beating Rory McIlroy in a morning round. He had to play 36 holes that day. And I think he lost that match because of a poor decision on 18. But the game was in great form. The iron play was in great form. He was able to find fairways when he needed to find fairways, and he was able to make some putts when he needed to make putts. So from tee to all the way through the green, every area of his game was strong. And he got on that property and he wasn't working on anything. He looked like the best player in the field, and he walked around with this air of confidence, which is every report that I hear is when he got there, he walked around like he owned the place. And he did for that week.
He does.
And I don't see any of that right now. I see a player in the few events he's played in 2021. He's losing strokes in every category. He's outside the top 170 on the PGA Tour, as for PGA Tour statistics, in every major strokes gain category. So how is this guy going to just win because he has a great course record? We talk about it all the time. I favor recent form over course history.
I'll put a bow on it like this, because you mentioned the lead-in form, and I ran the numbers earlier this week. In the 8 tournaments prior to his 2019 Masters victory, he was gaining strokes in all 4 categories, like you had mentioned, Greg, all 4 of the strokes gain categories. This year, he's losing in his 8 events prior to right now. He's losing in 3 of the 4 categories. He's essentially 2 strokes per round. This time around, it is evident. It is it's tough. It's a dart throw at the moment. Zach is enjoying the show. Thank you very much in the chat. We'll try to get through as many as we can here at the right time. We're going to get into the 8K range and find some value, but first we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners. And we're back. Quickest break ever. 8K range, Greg. This starts off with guys like one Adam Scott, and goes down to, let's see, Paul Casey at a flat 8,000. We've got a couple of past champions in here. I guess, well, Sergio Garcia has withdrawn, so don't play Sergio. Jordan Spieth is here. Jason Day, who has a great Masters record, is here. Who in this range moves the needle most for you?
Oh, who moves it? Well, there are two guys that really jump off the page to me, and I'm very interested in seeing how they do. And we watched them yesterday, right? They contended yesterday. It's Hideki Matsuyama and Jason Day. Jason Day, to me, his swing looks really good right now. And when Jason Day's iron play is in good form, he's really hard to beat. He's the best player around the greens on the PGA Tour, so he does gain a lot there. He is a great putter, which is it bodes really well for him at Augusta National, but he's got great finishes there at Augusta National. So I like Jason Day because he's coming in off a hot week, and it reminds me of what happened heading into the PGA Championship. I know that this time the major championship comes a little bit sooner. It's earlier on in the streak, but I could see another Jason Day streak starting this week. Additionally, Hideki Matsuyama, who also came in tied second along with Dustin Johnson, seems to have something going with the putting, and he is a regular great ball striker. It never stops with him. So yeah. when Hideki gets a little confidence going with the putter, he's someone to watch out for. And Rick, when I look through these things, Matthew Wolff definitely is a guy you got to look at as well. Mm-hmm. But to me, guys who can carry the ball a long way, guys who hit the ball a long way is something that, especially when we get away from the big guns where everybody hits it a long way. Now we really got to start looking into that. Because now we get a little bit more of a mix of some long hitters, some not so long hitters. And I'm taking a guy who's a great ball striker, hits it plenty high like Hideki.
Well, I'll tell you what, Alex Hahn in the chat agrees with you. He likes Hideki and Jason Day. I certainly think that Jason Day's results on paper are math from CJ Cup or Zozo. I can't remember which one it was. Maybe CJ Cup, where he was like in the top 10 on Sunday. And he withdrew. He was playing much better than his WD will indicate. So I'm okay with that. You mentioned Matthew Wolff. So I don't think it's all that, I don't think it's much of a coincidence that Matthew and DeChambeau play well at the same courses, right? I think that they benefit long hitters. Now, the concern for Matthew Wolff is a couple of things. He is coming off the worst driving performances of his career at the Zozo Championship and the CJ Cup. That's his weapon, though. I'm willing to think he's had a couple of weeks to figure it out. He gets back. And the other thing that goes against him is that he's making his first appearance. I'd argue, Greg, this year more than any other year, with the class of first-timers that we have, with the weird Augusta National in November, no patrons, like, I like first timers this year. I'm not necessarily writing them off as much as we like to do in other weeks.
Yeah, it's a good point, Rick. I don't think you write them off because they're first timers. I'm not necessarily favoring first timers, but they have a greater advantage this year than they normally do against other first timers, right? It's not an advantage over the rest of the field. It's an advantage over past first timers who have not had great success. But that being said, right. The soft conditions also, they will help a first timer. You can get away with a little bit more when greens are a little bit softer. They're not going to be soft. It's not going to be hit and splat, but they'll be softer than they are when it's firm and fast. So that presents a little bit more of an opportunity. You can get away with a mistake more often than you can in a normal year, and that will bode well for these players. Also, as time goes on and our viewing experience, the analysts, as they continue to cover Masters year in and year out, it's almost like you've played it when you haven't played it. You know where to miss, where not to miss from watching it every year. And as time goes along and these broadcasts get better and better, and the technology and the coverage of the greens, and as all that continues to improve, I think first timers are going to start to have a greater understanding, because as they all say, Rick, you got to know where to miss. And yes. It's almost in a strange way not that hard to figure out if you've been paying attention for a really long time.
And Ricky Fowler told us about those quadrants when we interviewed him a couple of days ago. That is available in the First Cut pod and on YouTube in those feed. You can check that out. Alex wants to know if Tony Finau gets over 30% owned in single entry contests. I think it'll be close, Alex. I think he's probably going to be one of the highest owned golfers on the slate. I'm going to move down to the 7K range. There's someone I want to talk about in the 8K range, but I'm going to save him for the end. I want to jump into the 7K real quick because I think there's some interesting. You start to see the player pool expand. There's a lot of guys in the 7K range, but maybe not as much as a full field event. It is led off by Louis Oosthuizen and Scott Justin Rose, all the way down to Danny Willett, Ian Poulter, Jason Kokrak. Scotty Scheffler, shocking to see this number on him. Really well up until the U.S. Open. He had to withdraw because he tested positive for COVID. Hasn't really rounded back into form yet. He had 2 really great rounds in Houston, 2 pretty poor rounds. We know what he can do in terms of DraftKings scoring. So he's someone that I'm pretty laser focused on in the 7K.
The top 2 players in this range, I have my eyes on, in Louis Oosthuizen because of what he tends to do in major championships. He's very comfortable at this venue, and I expect Louis' game to hold up this week. So I am a fan of him. Scotty Scheffler is almost the obvious one, another great value play where his talent far exceeds his price. So I look to Scotty Scheffler as a guy who's he has the firepower to compete here. He hits it plenty far, 308 yards off the tee last year, which is plenty long. He hits it high. He's fearless, which I love about him. He will play aggressive. And if he can maintain control of his iron play, which I want to say last year for the whole 2020 season, he was 33rd on tour, approaching the greens, 10th tee to green. If he can bring his best stuff and keep his wits about him and play smart when he needs to play smart, aggressive when he needs to play aggressive, he's going to be a great choice. So those 2 guys right at the top have the firepower to contend in this event. Maybe a step too far to say they could win, but I think they can contend. First page leaderboard type players. So I'm definitely looking there. Then as I go the rest of the way, Rick, I want to get your strategy on this, general strategy. But for me, I'm looking for guys who have really high club head speed. I'm looking for distance. Some players that are maybe a little shorter, 1 or 2 of them is going to pop up. But you just increase your chances when you go with guys with really high club head speed. So the guy that jumps off for me as the lower end 7K range is Jason Kokrak. He's a great driver of the golf ball. And at 7,000 flat, a winner this year on a difficult golf course where everybody was saying leading in, it's a great setup for Augusta National, great preparation. Kokrak, to me, jumps off the page as a great value play.
Yeah, he's 7,000 flat. He is someone that I'm glad you brought him up because he was 7th on tour in driving distance last year. People don't realize that. Like when you start naming bombers, you never get to Jason Kokrak. Should I was more impressed. I feel like I was more impressed not with his victory, but the fact that after playing 300 events and getting your first win, you backed it up the next week with a top 20, like a similarly deep field. Like I was even more impressed with that. So yeah, I'm pretty much in on Jason Kokrak. We got a question about Sung J M earlier. I wish he's just been he's just been meddling around, kind of, what's the word? Just floating. I mean, he's not doing anything in the game. It's kind of all over the place at the moment. And one of those shorter hitters that I think could pop, Greg, is Cam Smith. He's 7,300. Here's what I think about Cam Smith. He's on a 10-cut streak right now. He's made the cut 10 straight times, which I'm not so worried about this week. But I look at hhis last 2 events. And Zozo played really well. He has a top 5 here 2 years ago. And if this is wet, if it is kind of nasty, if it is a little soggy, that's how he won the Sony Open in January. It was kind of nasty and soggy all week long, especially on Sunday. I think he might be able to put it all together. So that's track. I'm focused on Cam Smith. I probably don't want anything to do with like Gary Woodland, who's just playing through injury right now. And then Scotty Scheffler at the top is as you mentioned, Greg. I think that's the obvious one.
Yeah, I would agree, Rick. And I think Cam Smith is a great add. And these are players that stand out in this kind of in this area in amongst their peers. So I think Cam Smith's definitely a guy to add in there and take a look at him.
Okay, let's jump down to the 6K. This is where you really need to figure this out. This is where you have a combination of consistent names that we see every single a week, like an amateur or two, and then you've got the past champions, and you're trying to figure out what to do with it, Greg. There's a couple of names that I think are obvious for me, right? If you've been following along, I'm going to say Lonto Griffin's name. I'm going to say Sebastian Munoz's name, but there is one guy at 6,800. We don't spend a lot of oxygen on. But I was running the numbers from the restart, Greg, and I hate to even compare him to Justin Thomas, but he's not as good version of Justin Thomas. They've both been hitting their irons well. They've both been great around the green. Siwoo has popped at times. Obviously, JT much better. The results are much better, but they're doing it in a somewhat similar style. That's probably a name that I could get on because I think that Zach Johnson's going to be incredibly popular. And rounded back into form. I think that he'll be popular, and a nice pivot might be the old Siwoo.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from there, but I like another guy that you mentioned in Sebastian Munoz.
Yeah.
To me, at 6,700, he's the play. I think he has in this group. He's got a higher floor, higher ceiling than a Zach Johnson, for sure. If it was going to get really windy out there and we were going to get 20-mile-an-hour winds, then Zach Johnson would come more into my radar. But with these conditions, when it's a little bit soft, this is going to be an aerial game. And you're going to need some height. You're going to need some distance, as I've said, in every price range. And Sebastian Munoz does that. And there's not a lot of options down here that gives you that. Does that mean that's the only way? Every single player on the leaderboard is going to be a really long hitter, a real high ball hitter, a really great ball striker in that regard? No, there's always anomalies and outliers. But when I get down into ranges like this, I like to increase my chances. So with Sebastian Munoz, to me, with his skill set and his recent form, it increases the chances that you're going to get a dark horse that's a winner, that performs very, very well. And so I prefer a Munoz because I think he has the ceiling, and I think his floor is a little higher than Siwoo Kim. Siwoo Kim to me is there's a big miscut risk. There's a big miscut.
Yeah,
risk.
the bottom can drop out of it.
Yeah, right.
There is no floor.
So, I don't want to fall into the basement here. I'd like to get a Munoz in there where, man, I really don't know. I feel like, are you with me on that? Do you think he's got a little bit of a higher floor?
For sure. I mean, Siwoo's floor is probably as low as anybody's. I mean, we've seen him go through stretches where he just can't figure out the game. So yeah, no, I think that's, I mean, since the end of last season, he's been great. So I 100% agree with you there. Here's a name that I think we have to talk about. It's Henrik Stenson. And this is trying to decide what's more important, course history, because Stenson's been phenomenal at the Masters, or recent form where he's missed 4 of his last 5 cuts. I actually think he WD'd in Houston. Like now we're playing that game again, Greg.
Yeah, and this game is one that I've gone back and forth with in my career. There was a time where I liked course history more than recent form. You follow those trends, it's easy to get on board, but I've learned through time and many losses and getting burnt many times by guys who always play well at the Masters who weren't in good form coming in. I've been burnt too many times. So to me, it's clear the advantage is in recent form. And if you just consistently play recent form over course history, you use course history, but when you're in this debate, you take recent form over course history, you'll be more successful. So to me, recent form is everything. It has grown so fast for me this year, especially. So I'm all recent form, and I'm staying away from Henrik Stenson.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The name that I saved, Greg, he's actually from the 8K range. It's Jordan Spieth. You know, it's kind of similar to the conversation we just had, but I'm not going to touch it. I know that, and we were talking about this earlier. We've never had the Masters during an NFL Sunday. So these big contests on daily fantasy sites, the casual fans anyway, they get are now, now there's going to be a Masters with NFL only DFS players who are like, oh, Jordan Spieth, he's good, right? He's good at the Masters. Like, I'm interested to see what his ownership is going to be. I don't think I'll be contributing to it in any way, but I do think it's very intriguing this week.
There's an advantage. This is the interesting thing about Jordan. he makes birdies. He can make a lot of birdies still, even though he's not in great form. So I don't. There's a pathway to him being a good pick. But the thing that worries me is the double bogeys and triple bogeys. He's made 12 so far this year. And not that many rounds. He's played, 4 events, I think missed 3 cuts. So you're looking at 6 tournaments there. And then he made 2 cuts. There were 2 4-round events. So that's 8. So you're looking at 14 events and 14 rounds, and he's got 12 double bogeys or worse. And that's hugely concerning to me. It's a sign that he doesn't have control of his golf ball on command. And when that happens at Augusta National and you want to hit the ball to the front right quadrant, as Ricky referred to, Rick, or the back left quadrant, or you need to put the ball in a quadrant on the greens, and all of a sudden the opposite shot comes out, and I don't care how magical your short game is, you're done. And that's the biggest concern with Jordan for me. It's the big numbers. And I mean, you want to enjoy some Friday afternoon sweats. Jordan's your guy, but he's not mine.
He might not even give you a Friday afternoons. I tried to get inside information earlier in the week or last week on Trevor Immelman's game because he's in here at 6,100. So I threw in the group chat, like, how's the game look? All this stuff. Can he beat CT Pan? He's not playing. So I don't think there's anybody under, what do you think, Greg? 60. I mean, I probably wouldn't play. Would you play Charles Schwartzel? He's 6,500. That would be, I probably wouldn't play anybody under Lanto, but would you play Schwartzel or anybody under there?
Well, Schwartzel in particular, possibly. I think he's still swinging well. I think he's still got something in the tank there. We remember how hard he was trying to get into the playoffs at the end of last year. And I liked that. Yeah. I think you could see some fight out of him. He's not my favorite play. But if you look down, like a guy like JT Poston is interesting to me at 6,300. Tyler Duncan, those players, even Jimmy Walker, who's going to have Bones Mackay on the bag, they pique my interest more than Charles Schwartzel specifically. But Tyler Duncan and JT Poston would be the 2 guys. I'd probably leave Jimmy Walker out. It's really just that Bones is going to be with him, why I brought him up. But JT Poston is, with his fingerprint, a really solid iron player. Now, it's been up and down of late, but there's this sense that he could play well. I don't know if it's going to happen this week, but there's a sense that his thumbprint, his game should suit this course somewhat well. But it's unlikely. I mean, this is not a comfortable range. You're looking at some players who have not been playing great. So I don't really like this range, but maybe a JT Poston, maybe a Tyler Duncan if you had to.
All right. I think that'll do it. Greg, it's going to be a great week, isn't it?
Oh man, this is a one-of-a-kind week that I love. That's why I'm wearing I'm wearing a Master shirt here. I may not take it off until Sunday. Fortunately, Rick, we're social distancing. We're on Zoom. We don't have to be together, so I can wear the shirt all I want.
There you go. We are going to have so much more content throughout the week, including round-by-round breakdowns, our storylines, and best bets. That's coming tomorrow, plus a Masters mailbag on Wednesday. Remember, put those questions in Apple, iTunes, 5-star rating and review. We'll answer them. That's our win-win situation. Greg DuCharme, thank you very much for joining me. You can find Greg on Twitter at @TheRealGFD. You can find me at RickRunGood. This has been The First Cut, and we'll catch you next time.